It is the year 1996. Humanity has advanced to the point where they can now travel in space and establish settlements on Mars and the Moon. Despite this progress, the Cold War is still going on between the Soviet Union and the United States, and the tension between them continues to rise. One day, the United Nations sends Dr. Elizabeth and the Cosmic Culture Club to a UN base on Mars in an exchange program to promote peace and understanding. Things on Mars seemed to go well until the base was suddenly attacked by mysterious high-tech weapons known as superpowered tracers, or SPT for short. One of the SPTs, known as Layzner, fought back against the others and caused them to withdraw. The pilot of that SPT was Ryosuke, who came from an empire known as Grados to warn the Earth about an upcoming invasion by the Gradosian race. Eiji himself is a Gradosian Earthling hybrid who opposed the idea of invading Earth due to his Earthling blood and ultimately hijacked the Layzner in order to travel to Earth. Now stuck on Mars, Eiji and the 6 remaining survivors from the UN base must set aside their racial differences and find a way to get off Mars and convince the various nations from destroying each other and focus on stopping the Gradosian invasion. When I first started this show years back, I didn't really think much of it at first aside from the fact that it was made by Ryosuke Takahashi of Vodom's fame. Though as I go through the series, I began to see that Layzner is pretty special. Takahashi has always done great work with Sunrise, and Layzner is another example of just how brilliant he can be. To be fair though, Layzner does have major flaws, which I will get into later. Let's start by talking about the premise of the first half, which is basically an alternate timeline where the Cold War continued into the 90s and the arms race between the Soviet Union and the United States went all the way up to space. It shows us that humanity is truly starting to evolve beyond Earth, but at the same time, it's also something to be feared considering the dangerous weapons that both nations possess that could potentially wipe us all out. The Gradosians see this progression of the human race as a threat to their own kind, and so they decide to conquer it to defend themselves. This type of plot may sound pretty cliche on paper, but when you sit down and actually watch the series, you will be blown away by all the twists and turns the story takes. The first arc of the story itself mainly focuses on Eiji and the 6 survivors from the UN base and how they desperately try to escape the Gradosians' wrath and contact Earth about the upcoming invasion. The relationship didn't start well though, as some of them were reluctant to trust Eiji since he was half Gradosian, especially David, who harbors animosity towards him and blames him for the death of his best friend. Though over time, they start to warm up to him and even consider him a leader in their group, someone they can look up to for when the situation gets tough. Speaking of tough, one of the things that I really liked about this show was just how horrifying it would get. This show is dark as hell. This is easily the darkest mech series Takahashi has ever created. The show opens up with almost everyone on the UN base dying, with very few survivors. And throughout the first half of the series, many opportunities that the characters have to make it out of their terrible situation is almost immediately crushed by the Gradosians. This actually makes for good television because it keeps you wondering if the characters will ever be able to return to Earth, so you keep watching to see what happens. This show had me hooked by the 5th episode, and I really liked how it played out. When we get to the second arc of the series, not only is it one of the coolest things I've ever seen from a mecha anime in the 80s, but it's also very shocking as well. I wish I could say why, but that involves some pretty heavy spoilers, so I won't say much other than it combines kick-ass action outside of the mechs, it introduces an awesome villain, and features some of the best SPT battles in the series. I also enjoyed the themes presented in Layzner, particularly the theme of racism, which was constant throughout the series, as both the humans and Gradosians see each other as evil threats that should be dealt with brutality. Yet they never realized that they were not all that different from each other. While they are from different solar systems and have vastly different technology and customs, they both have pride in themselves and can be very cruel to others, including their own kind. Moving on to the characters, I like Eiji. I consider him one of the earliest examples of a pacifist pilot in mecha anime. Instead of aiming for the kill like most other mech pilots, Eiji goes for weak points on an SPT in order to disable it, a task that is often difficult to do because of the immoral AI built into the Layzner. The reason he does this is because while he has a desire to protect the Earth and the humans that live on it, he's still attached to Gradosians. This is an inner struggle that he deals with throughout much of the series, and I think it's quite captivating for a protagonist. When we get to the second arc, he fully realizes his goals, and he becomes a badass. Anna is mostly quiet and shy in the first arc, which I don't blame her considering she never seen destruction so up close before in her life. So to compromise, they made her the narrator for most of the story. I thought this was fine, it didn't get annoying, and I like that she gives us an insight on how she and the others feel about the events that unfold around them. As for Anna herself, well, she starts off as a timid girl who develops a crush on Eiji, but later on in the second arc she becomes much more outspoken and brave. David is your average hothead who blames Eiji for the death of his friend, but ultimately warms up to him and later on becomes a badass in his own right. Simone comes from a wealthy family and initially did not give much of a shit about the conflict, but over time that changed when she developed feelings for Eiji. Rohan is the geek who is very knowledgeable about tech, and in the second arc becomes the most interesting human character in the series for me. Why? Well, I can't say without spoiling the story. Arthur is the comic relief that occasionally helps the group out in certain situations, and Dr. Elizabeth is the motherly figure of the group. Most of these people went from being terrified individuals who are just trying their best to survive, to rebels who share a common goal and basically treat each other like family. I like that. I like that a lot. The Gradosians may be bent on taking over Earth, but some of them aren't inherently bad people. Gale is a perfect example because he is Eiji's close friend, and he planned on getting married to his sister Julia. Since he is also in the military, however, it causes him to choose between his friendship with Eiji or his loyalty to Grados. Other Gradosians had their own motives that drive them, such as Gostero's twisted desire to kill, and Carla wanting to prove her worth to Gale. So far, I've said a lot of positive things about Layzner, and I really enjoyed much of the series. So what were the problems with it? Well, it's basically the terrible pacing and the ending, which was the result of major issues during the show's production. You see, Layzner was originally planned to be 52 episodes long, and there was apparently a planned third arc in the story, so the second part was meant to be the halfway point. The question remains, what happened, and why was this canned? Well, one of the reasons given is because of controversies about how the second part of Layzner was similar to what happened with Korea when Imperial Japan took it over. This was a reason I find very weird, considering that Gundam did the same thing. Granted, it was more subtle about it. Another reason was the ratings. They got pretty bad by the end, and the only reason why I think that was the case was because of the fact that this show shared the same time slot as Zeta Gundam. Gee, I wonder which show people were more bound to watch. Then of course, there was the constant budget cuts which reduced the number of episodes to 38. Mind you, the first arc of Layzner is pretty long. It takes about 24 to 25 episodes to complete. The second arc, in comparison, only had 12 episodes to finish the story. This is where the pacing issues kick in, and you really start to feel it during the last few episodes. It was so bad that the ending of the series had to be rewritten because of all these problems going on. And when you finally get to the ending, it felt like we skipped out on a giant chunk of episodes. It's like, what the fuck just happened? Before you ask, yes, I am aware of the OVAs, and that it has a much better ending. But that does not excuse how the anime was handled. All in all, despite the last few episodes having major pacing problems, I enjoyed the journey that led up to it, and I think that was more worth it. Layzner's visuals and animation is pretty much on par with many of the other shows during its time. It has stock footage, there are inconsistencies in the artwork, but that's to be expected. There are a couple of interesting things here. In the first arc, the pilots wore the traditional pilot suits, but in the second arc, they start wearing these scouters, which may have been the inspiration for the scouters used by many of the early villains in Dragon Ball Z. I also liked how the character designs evolved over time. They went from being pretty standard to looking like characters you would see in Fist of the North Star. The meat of the series, the SPTs, has some really good designs, especially the Layzner and the Zakao, and the battles are really fun to watch. It is a shame that some designs like Layzner's upgraded backpack were left out due to budget cuts, but as for everything else, I think it was satisfying. God, I love the music in this show. There are some really good scores here that are worth a listen. The opening theme, Miros no Yoni, Lonely Way by Airmail from Nagasaki, is a really great song. It's in my top 10 opening themes in mecha anime, and the two ending themes definitely fit the somber mood of the series. I don't have much to say in this segment, but the voice acting is pretty good. The voice of Eiji is Kazuhiko Inoue, who also voiced Jared from Zeta Gundam, Cyborg 009, and Krin Kashim from Takahashi's previous work, Dogram. Gastaro is voiced by Masashi Hirose, who previously played Rumble Roll in Gundam, and Hiroko Emery voices Anna. She would go on to voice Chotsu in Dragon Ball. Honestly, I really wish that the people behind this show went through of making Layzner 52 episodes. It probably would have been fantastic stuff, and I would have considered it one of the best anime from the 80s. I think if this show had a different time slot outside of Zeta Gundam, it probably would have done very well. But as it is, it's a great journey that sadly begins to fall apart at the end. If you want a much better ending, then I highly suggest watching the third OVA. As for what I think of the anime as a whole, regardless of the ending, I think it's great. I like the storytelling for the most part, the art and animation was good for its time, and that music is super dope. Now, this series was planned to be released in America, but we sadly never got it. Hopefully one day, a company like Discotek Media or Right Stuff will license it. But for now, if you really want to watch the series, then fan subs are your best bet. Layzner is a good series despite its problems in the end, and another reason why Ryosuke Takahashi is a fantastic director. Final score, 8 out of 10.